Welcome to the Providence College Podcast. My name is Joe Carr. We are pleased to present a recording of a presentation by Chris Dankberg, a member of PC's class of 2003. At the invitation of the Economics Department, from which he earned his degree, Mr. Dankberg gave a presentation on sports, economics, and information on September 25th. An expert on the delivery of live content, including sports, to airline customers, Mr. Dankberg is an executive at a company called ViaSat. He also has worked at eBay and StubHub and for the San Diego Padres.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. Paul is the one that asked me to do this and then got to speak with a lot of folks in the economics department. And it's really a pleasure to be back here. I was a student. I graduated in 2003. I had a super senior year, so I was class of 2002, but actually most of my learning took place in my fifth year. I think the truth is I'm thrilled to be here. I really appreciate the introduction also. I've been working and interested in sports pretty much my whole professional career. I was graduated in 2003, so I've pretty much been working in sports since then. I don't know if I really knew how it was going to work out, but I didn't know what else was going to get me interested in anything. I used to do spreadsheets. I was a junior, lived in Davis Hall right over there. I was in Fennel as a freshman. And as a junior, I can pretty distinctly remember I was doing spreadsheets in my dorm room trying to figure out how to explain how baseball careers end early due to things like aging, losing eyesight, etc. And my roommate was basically like, why are you doing that? You're not doing your homework. You should be doing something else instead. I actually ended up getting that article published in a journal called Baseball Prospectus. Does anybody here even know what that is, I guess? Okay, we got 1, 2, 3, couple, 4. That was my first time where it ever occurred to me, that was in 1999 or 2000, they could actually figure out a way to get anybody to listen to me when I was just basically working on stuff that I was already interested in myself. And that you could turn around and you could turn that into something that mattered. It was before Moneyball, so I'm guessing if I asked you guys how many people here have read or seen the movie Moneyball, a lot of heads, yeah. So that was a thing that was happening before the internet. In forums, people would go to conferences, they would talk in hushed tones about baseball statistics. Bill James, you guys have all probably heard of Bill James. It was the internet that I think made that a reality for somebody like me in their dorm room. And at the beginning, it was pretty much just about me and trying to make an excuse for why I cared about watching baseball games. But pretty quickly, you realize there was an actual community out there. People were talking and learning about sports. And there was a correlation to economics, there was a correlation to math. Me as a student, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time recounting all of the ways that I wasn't a great student. There's a professor in the back that had me. And if she went back, she reviewed transcripts or anything, hopefully. Luckily, I think I do have my diploma, and nobody's going to take it back from me. But the thing that I was most excited about was sports. And I don't know that I ever thought that I'd come back here and talk about it, but it's really exciting to be here because it really did work for me in terms of stimulating a lot of interesting ideas about how you could go on to have a career. And actually, the other thing that I was here to talk about in advance was how the internet is changing sports. So it sort of happened for me personally as an 18, 19-year-old student. And then it's happening in, kind of on a delay, 20 years later, it's happening in higher education. It's happening here, I'm sure, at Providence College. It's happening in movie, and you've heard about Netflix, you know about everything that's happening, streaming media. I'm assuming most people here couldn't care less about watching television. I mean, that's generally true. Do you still get TV in your dorm room? Yeah? Does anybody watch it? No? Every once in a while? Yeah, so I have kids. I have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. And, they know that nobody cares about watching television anymore. It's pretty much just about whatever you want to watch when you want to watch it. But I think 20 years ago, for me, I had the same experience, actually. I worked on the Cal newspaper, and they started a website right around the same time. It was, for me, it was like the dream come true because I got to go learn a little bit about how to write on the internet and take your own pictures and come back, reformat the story. I think nobody read it. My mom might have read it, my grandmother. But that was the first sort of signs of digital disruption in on-campus media. I was really drawn to that. I was really interested in sports journalism, math, and I was looking for ways to tie all that together, and this place really gave me the ability to do that. So it's really fun to come back here and talk to you guys. I'm going to try to give you a couple quick stories about what I'm doing now, Also wanted to leave a lot of time for questions, because I think a lot of you are here because you're trying to think about how could I do this in my career, or how can I get excited about something. And if it happens to be sports, that would be good with me, and I would try to answer those questions. But I also think the same thing is true if you're interested in other fields. I mean, the truth is what made it work for me was just that I liked sports and that it wasn't a chore. I mean, I literally was burying my face in baseball almanacs, converting to make my own databases to write reports that nobody really cared about. But it mattered to me. It allowed me to practice my writing skills. It got me better at math. It got me more comfortable with talking to groups of people. And all of that is the kinds of things that are going to allow you to go kind of find your own career. So, with that said, I was here today in Boston for a conference. I work for a company called ViaSat. We're based in North County, San Diego. If you guys have ever been to Legoland in Carlsbad, that's why most people know what Carlsbad is now. When I was a kid, it didn't exist. But Legoland is in San Diego. The zoo is in San Diego. It's a very nice place to come visit. If you guys you can come see me sometimes. But satellite communications is a pretty big business, but it's not actually historically something that has been done by public companies in the way that ViaSat works. My connection to ViaSat is pretty personal. My dad actually started the company about 32 years ago, but previous to that, he was working for a company that ended up becoming Qualcomm. There was a company called Linkabit. And satellite communications is sort of derivative of what's happening with your cell phone. Think about, now, can you even imagine not having access to a smartphone in your pocket? No. But 15 years ago, the technology was being developed in San Diego County by Qualcomm. ViaSat has actually been working on some similar technology, but working pointed at 30,000 miles up in space. I've been with the company for about 5 years, and previous to that, I was at StubHub, which ended up getting bought by eBay. And I spent most of my time at StubHub trying to learn about internet e-commerce product technology and what the internet was going to do to the traditional way that you would buy a ticket. So I'll ask the thing one more time. Has everybody here used StubHub before? Pretty much, yeah. I used to have to spell it, STUBHUB. Yeah, and then, no, it's not illegal. Exactly. We were actually being sued. When I started the company, we were being sued by the New England Patriots. Thank you very much. And we ended up getting sued by the Yankees several times. We got sued by everybody, pretty much. I escaped. One time worked at the World Series in 2006 in the early days of the company, and we actually had to go across state lines into Illinois to operate because we were not welcome in Missouri. This was the early days. Again, you think about internet companies this was pre-iPhone. Everything was being done on a desktop computer. People were calling in to order tickets, and we were actually finding them outside of the stadium and handing them over tickets so they could walk into the World Series, and they were spending thousands, maybe tens of thousands of dollars, and they were being told, hey, yeah, see that guy over there in the blue shirt? Yeah, he's got your tickets. And then that would be me, and I would hand them the tickets, and then they would walk in, and they wanted to see me to make sure that it was really going to happen and that they weren't going to be arrested, which, by the way, I also was trying to figure out what I was going to tell my parents if I was to be arrested. I was not, which was pretty lucky, but I was also told that they would cover me and bail me out of jail. But that was, to me, the reason I bring that up is that was the early days of what was happening in the internet, in the e-commerce world, was somebody could go online, buy a ticket to a sporting event like the World Series or the Masters or the Olympics, something you never would have had access to before, and all you had to do was type it into the computer and go buy the tickets. Now you can do it on your phone. And I was there sort of as that transition happened, and people became to, believe that you had to be able to get everything on your phone in 3 seconds. And that's a lot about what's happening on e-commerce today. And I did that for about 8 or 9 years. And right as I was sort of ready to go on and take on a different challenge, ViaSat launched a satellite that was the highest capacity satellite ever launched. It's 140 gigabits per second. I don't know what the internet connections that you guys have here, I'm sure, are very good, but for a lot of people around the United States and then the rest of the world don't have access to that kind of internet capability. So there was a couple different businesses that Viasat was looking to get into with this satellite, but one of them was in-flight. So if you fly JetBlue today, you're using Viasat technology when they give away free internet on the plane. There's also, we've got contracts with American Airlines, United Airlines, Qantas, a number of others, Alaska Airlines, Virgin America, and the application that people really have come to appreciate the most about using internet on an airplane is texting, being in communication with your family and friends, and also streaming sports, music, anything that you've stored on your computer that you'd like to watch online. You can go get access to that in real time. That as an amenity on an airplane is brand new. Nobody's really been offering that before, but for me, the timing was perfect because JetBlue, I think that was 2014 when JetBlue started flying, and at that point, if you guys use GoGo or a service like that, there's a lot of limitations. It's pretty expensive. There aren't really that many things that you can use GoGo for that are, the same way that you'd use it at your house. They're trying, and they've invested in some other technology, but a lot of that was a story that needed to be told about being able to have ubiquitous access to the internet on your phone. And so I went from StubHub, which is sort of e-commerce, explaining, this is legal, this will actually work, to going to a company in ViaSat that was a high technology company designing satellites, but actually not particularly familiar with explaining what can you do with this. JetBlue was really, really a good partner for us in terms of being able to explain that to people. So I'm here in Boston, there's an airline, it's called the Apex, it's the Airline Passenger Experience Show, and that show is actually all about buying content. If you guys go on an airplane, you sit in the scene and they got movies and everything else you'd like to listen to. They spend a lot of money buying those screens, and then they go buy programming for those screens. There's actually a show once a year. Everybody comes together. You go look at the latest, greatest technology. There's actually some cool stuff at this year's show around virtual reality. There's people trying to get you to wear a headset, which kind of freaks me out. But that's something that people are talking about doing on airplanes. But most of the show is around how am I going to keep you entertained for that 2 hours or 3 hours and try to make the time go by as fast as possible. Actually, I usually I don't have any slides or anything for today. I didn't think it was necessary, but there's one slide that I tend to show almost everybody. There's a New Yorker cartoon where there's a boardroom setting, and everybody looks around the room at each other and they say, I think we're going to have to reconsider our strategy that the internet is going away. and the idea is you can't just ignore the fact that the internet's going to show up and impact your business. And in the airline industry, it's happening specifically around media and content. And for 15 or 20 years, there's been a really, really steady business model of being able to go watch a movie, new releases, they call it like the 30-day window. That's moved, because nobody's really going and watching movies the same way. There's no Blockbuster. There's no, even the impact is being felt at the theater itself. The airlines used to be one of the most reliable places where you could go in and sell content, but it's not actually working quite the same way. There's a lot more choice. And one of the things that ViaSat's doing is we're bringing technology that you can get access to any kind of content that you'd like. There's a lot of other applications that people are excited about that you can use an internet connection for. So like, for instance, Esports. Does anybody, actually, this is a good time to take an informal poll. Does anybody here actually watch or play something like Overwatch in this room? Almost nobody. Yeah. It's interesting. That one of the things that people are saying is, if you're under the age of 21, you're not interested in traditional sports anymore. You're watching Twitch or you're watching other things. I'm not sure if that's totally true. I think I'm a big sports fan. I'm still trying to figure out how to play any of those games. My daughter just figured out how to floss. So I don't really know Fortnite, but I'm trying to learn. But the main thing that airlines are looking to do is capture your attention while you're flying. They don't really care what you're doing as long as you're not really, you're basically in a flying metal tube and it's an uncomfortable position to be in. So that's why they're giving you a movie or something else to do. But if you can also be productive during that time, you can be entertained in that time, that's what they're hoping for. And they're looking to internet connectivity providers like us to come up with new things that you can give somebody to do on a plane. So and I was there today, the conversations that are having are pretty much entirely around what's happening in the sports world that's going to make somebody excited to reach into their pocket and use their phone to keep in touch. And it's a more exciting experience than sitting back and watching a movie that maybe came out 3 months ago. Sports tends to be one of those things that people really, really, really want to keep in touch with, but you're limited in your ability to do that on an airplane. So my role at the company has actually ended up trying to partner with the people that, so for instance, if you guys are familiar with YouTube TV is a new product. There's also, Hulu's got a live streaming product. Pretty much everybody that has gotten into the streaming game has tried to figure out a way to connect with an audience that's really interested in watching sports. And I'm personally really excited about using our technology to go make that possible. The other thing that's happening is, if you guys are familiar with like daily fantasy gaming and things like that, that's another area that reminds me a little bit about what StubHub was like in the early 2000s. Is this legal? Can I really do this? I'm actually not sure if that's going to end up being the killer application for what people are using when they're watching sports, but those are the kinds of questions that we're being asked, and they all have kind of an economic underlying question, which is, what are you replacing? So I guess if you do fly today, there aren't a lot of airlines that are offering a ton of content. But there are, JetBlue has 36 channels of television, Delta's got television, and they're trying to cater to the people that have been watching sports, the NFL on Sunday, baseball, basketball in the evenings, and they want to keep your attention. And they're looking at their own distribution opportunity as a way to disrupt the traditional economics, which is I have to go out and I have to buy content, and I have to pay for that seat-back television, and I have to basically spend, in cases, tens of millions of dollars to try to occupy you, as opposed to now you show up, you bring your own device, you bring your own content, you have all the things that you'd like to do with your time, and you'd prefer to be able to do it the way that you do it at home. And that's a really significant shift in the way that the economics work. It actually is a lot like what was happening for me personally, my experience at StubHub, where you've got a really disruptive force in ticketing, which was I'd like to pick where I want to sit. I'd like to decide when I want to buy it. I want to buy it when, 3 hours before the game. That didn't used to be able to happen. The sort of traditional business model for how Ticketmaster worked was we're going to keep all the tickets. You have to call this phone number, and you're going to hope that when you call us, we're going to say yes, and then you're going to take whatever 2 seats or 4 seats we give you. And the entire business model of StubHub was you might be willing to pay a little bit more, although honestly the price for tickets came down over the course of that, but you would be willing to pay more to choose, and you'd be willing to pay more to be able to do it on your time. And to me, the internet is the thing that makes all of that possible. That's why I say you look at the cartoon when people say, that the internet is not going away anytime soon. You're going to reevaluate whether or not this is going to affect your business model. I think you guys should all be thinking about that, frankly, for whatever it is that you'd like to go into as a career after school. I told you a little bit, my personal experience was basically that it was happening to me in real time while I was at school here, and I kept getting a couple of, firsthand experiences about what, for a newspaper. And I do see the cow is still outside, which is comforting. I'm going to take one home and read it. But I'm guessing, you read that maybe if you're at lunch or something, you grab it on your way, but you're more likely to get access to news on your phone or somewhere else. And the truth is, there is really no business that isn't going to be impacted by the internet. If it hasn't been already, it's coming. Sports, for me, is the business, and I think this is a little bit of, I don't know if this is going to sound weird or not, but I loved sports as a kid. I couldn't really think of anything else I would ever do for a career. I couldn't think about how I was ever going to get paid anything. Why would somebody actually pay me to go learn about sports? I kind of kept working towards that end until I found something where that could happen. But the thing that drove me to that was actually believing that sports was going to change a lot and that I wanted to be a part of the change. So, I didn't want to just sit back and sort of, hey, this is cool, and it is really neat to work in sports. And I don't know, has anybody in here, I'm assuming you guys are all taking internships and stuff. Have you guys worked for teams yet? Nobody? Looking around? Not much. Yeah, so broadcasting was the thing that I was specifically interested in while I was in school. It sort of morphed into baseball operations, which was what the San Diego Padres did. It's literally, you're sitting out there with a radar gun, you're talking to the scouts, it's cool, it feels like a very cool thing to do, and it was really cool, but it was also changing, and if you guys did see the movie Moneyball, you sort of saw what the discussion was, which is your eyes are going to deceive you, are you really making good comparisons, are you thinking through what all of these changes are going to, what what does more data allow you to do from a decision-making standpoint? And that all happened, in my opinion, largely because of access to information, and the internet really spread that pretty quickly. And it's going to happen to pretty much every industry that you could possibly go into. It's certainly going to happen in finance. It's happening in the airline industry with respect to how they sell tickets, for instance. And then how do they give you, so in our world, they're really trying to get you to connect and use the internet while you're flying, because they have all these other applications, like they can reroute you. If you've got an internet connection, you don't have to get off the plane and you have to deal with somebody at a customer service desk, which nobody likes to do. There's a bunch of different applications that connectivity enables. So one of the other things I was going to talk to you guys about a little bit was my experience here specifically, and then how that translated directly into how I got my first job. And I wanted to leave plenty of time to answer questions. I feel like I remember I sat in a talk towards the end of my career at Providence, and it was pretty impactful. And there's also a professor he's not here today, did a very bad job of trying to get in touch with him ahead of time. His name was Frank O'Brien, and he was an economics professor when I was here. And towards the end of my career at Providence, I was trying to figure out how was I actually going to go get a job in sports. And I had gone to a conference, and I had watched somebody talk, and they explained, what they had done. They went to the Cape Cod League, which is a wooden bat league out on Cape Cod. And if you're a college baseball player, you spend all season hitting with an aluminum bat, but they give you a couple of swings with a wooden bat, and they see if you can go play in the minor league baseball system. And I did that, and I went out there and met a couple people. But the person that encouraged me to do that was Frank O'Brien. And he took an interest in what I was doing. I guess he was the other person other than my mom, maybe, that was reading what I was writing. But he sort of drew it out of me. I didn't really have an idea. I had an idea about how to write an article. I had an idea about how to formulate some opinions. I actually wrote an article about Tim Salmon, who's a baseball player, whose career ended prematurely, and nobody really knew why. And that was the first thing that I tried to write for publication. And he was, Frank was one of the people that just kept asking me questions. Well, why do you think this? What is really important about this data set? And a lot of it for me, that translated directly into my first job with the San Diego Padres, which was, I was writing it was basically a pre-arbitration. You guys have heard of arbitration for baseball? It's like where you go in and you negotiate what your salary is going to be. The collective bargaining agreement tells you what the parameters are. And you basically go and you sit across from somebody, a player agent and the team, come together and they decide what the salary is going to be. It's going to be a lot of money, but it's either going to be $2 million or $5 million. And I helped prepare an arbitration case as like a project, essentially. And Frank was willing to basically put in the time and give me feedback. I had no idea. My cousin also actually was one of the people who was a student at the time also, and was willing to look at that and provide me like real life feedback. And the thing I think I would tell you guys, and I'll leave maybe if you guys have specific questions for me about how to translate this into something that you're interested in, the number one thing I would tell you have to put yourself out there. Even if it doesn't really feel like what you're doing is that impactful, or you're not even sure why this matters, I would take the time to write it up, go find a professor here or a faculty member or somebody that you're friends with. And so I'm going to out him. He might, I don't know if he would, I guess I'm being recorded, but his name is Chris Simino. He's a really nice guy. He's a very smart dude. And he's got a PhD. I think he works up in Ithaca. But Chris was like the guy saying, what are you doing? Why are you spending all this time doing this? But he was cool about it. He would read it and he would give me feedback, and some of my other friends would too. But unless you're willing to put your work out there and kind of chart that path, nobody's ever going to come up with the perfect application, the perfect job for you. You're going to have to work towards that. And so I guess hopefully what I show you a little bit about today is you really can take that skill set and grow it and take it into a new job. So for me, I went from baseball, trying to work in sports broadcasting, and then eventually actually trying to figure out, how to point the radar gun better and how to explain what you're seeing, into working in an internet company that most people didn't know if it was legal or how to spell it or if it was actually going to ever turn into anything. eBay ended up buying the company for, I think, about $300 million, and I was not the person that started the company, just to be very clear. I was kind of in the next wave of people that came in as a new hire. Job got me to San Francisco, got me into the Bay Area, I learned a lot worked with really, really smart people at a time where the internet was really taking off. The iPhone comes out, and the truth was sort of subject matter expertise, caring deeply about why did somebody want to go pick out tickets and why it wasn't to rip off and why the marketplace was going to win out, was firsthand knowledge. I didn't actually go to graduate school. I don't know if they would have let me in, but there was some stuff that I probably could have gone into graduate school to go study, but I got my education more or less in real time. By the way, I have kids, and I would love for my kids to go to graduate school, but it wasn't for me, my wife did. But you got that education in real time in an environment that was changing really, really quickly. And that has actually kind of taken me to where I am now at ViaSat, where, again, we show up, it's a disruptive technology. In the case of the airline business, the disruptive technology is the internet itself. So whereas on StubHub, it's finding tickets and using your phone to do that, on an airplane, it's can you use the internet at all? And the answer before was usually no, and now the answer is yes. And by the way, we're going to go do that at ViaSat around the world. So I'm looking at markets with boats. I'm actually on my way to Europe. We're doing some stuff already in Europe. We're going to look to do the same things in Asia, South America, Africa. But again, that's not a job that exists as much as it's something you've kind of got to forge your own way. So I'm a really big believer in that, and I really am grateful for coming back here to talk to you guys, because I think Providence, for me, was the place where I really got to kind of get the hang of that, and the environment was really accommodating, and I really appreciate it. So something I always wanted to do was come back and hopefully try to help at least a couple people sort of find their own way to go create that kind of impact. So I think we're pretty good on time, so I would take a couple questions, I guess, if anybody has any. Yeah, and I'll repeat it back. Yeah, no, that's okay.
I just was wondering, it's kind of a general question, what kind of skills, like when you actually went out into the workplace, did you find that your employers or you as an employer found valuable in new hires?
That's a very good question. So what kind of skills did I find, and then also as somebody that has hired people out of school, new grads and beyond, I would say, so having facility with math, in an economics department is really critical. Being comfortable to outline an idea and put it into Microsoft Excel, to use not a particularly new piece of technology, is really valuable. And then being able to communicate that, and like I said, sort of be willing to put your idea out there, and do that in a way where you're sort of not intimidated by the status quo. Or maybe what other people think. I think communication skills in general, writing especially, writing stands out. I know that you guys are probably all sick of writing papers and stuff, but to me that still separates, whether it's an email to try to go, get a job in an interview setting, a well-written follow-up email, somebody that's taken the time to actually go do the homework. I mean, I can tell you most of the people that I have hired, and I've done a decent amount of hiring, new grad and beyond, are people that took the time to try to understand what problems I might be having and address those either beforehand or afterwards after hearing. So, the ability to communicate is, and especially in a world everybody's talking about, your job's going to be taken over by a robot. I'm not sure how close we are to that, but robots can't write particularly well, and they definitely can't synthesize information the same way. So I think the ability to kind of, sort of, if you're in a finance background or if you're in economics, you're obviously going to have to be pretty nimble with math and with a spreadsheet, but then to be able to bottom line that and communicate it in writing, I think is, I would tell you, relative to the people that I work with, the thing that separates really outstanding people is the ability to succinctly communicate in writing. Sure. Okay.
Certainly you were lucky to find a passion that you could follow through.
Yeah.
But I think the talents that now the industries look for are people that can manage projects, they're problem solvers, critical thinking, things that perhaps not truly we can teach in classrooms.
Yeah.
But through these type of trainings that you go through, writing and researching. So how did you communicate what that interest was when you went to that industry?
Yeah, that's a good question too. So I think where did I find, I think I was saying before I was up here talking, I was saying like when I was in school, I was going out of my way to try to find an internship or anything, and not even a internship, but that's part of the Frank O'Brien story. I won't tell it, but he basically allowed me to create an internship, which was incredible, to try to get that for him. But it took a lot of practice, so I kind of took any odd job I could, whether it was here. I worked a little bit in the WDM radio. I did the paper. I did the website. I think I might have even done a brief stint at the SID's office, and pretty much any of those experiences, program management, somebody's going to hand you something, you're going to walk away, and then you're going to come back in 2 weeks, and you at least have to have something that resembles what the person was asking for. You can't get that unless you go try it. And I would tell you, if you're expecting to have that skill before somebody gets you the job, you're never going to get challenged. You kind of have to go take something on that you don't really necessarily know how to do entirely, but you've got the pieces, and you got to pull them together. And I do think that idea that somebody's going to hand you off something that requires oversight and the ability to you only get that with real experience. I think in a classroom setting, you can learn to get comfortable with the ideas, and you can challenge your ideas, and somebody's going to give you feedback. In the real world, a lot of times when somebody's giving you a job, it's because they don't necessarily want to think about that thing anymore. They don't have time to think about that anymore. And if you're going to be good at your job and you're going to get additional opportunities, it's because the thing that you were able to bring back added value to that, to that employer. And to me, that really was just kind of looking for every opportunity I could to try to prove that. And for me, sports specifically, and I think it's even more so now, 20 years ago, there wasn't a ton of people in mass applying to sports jobs, but that also meant that you had to go find those opportunities for yourself. So I think trial and error is the biggest thing for me, and kind of looking any opportunity where somebody gives you the opportunity to go work on something and bring it back and get that feedback is really good.
Simply the traditional jobs are gone.
Yeah.
Now you gotta identify where that value.
Yeah, you're gonna find the value yourself. I think that's right. Yeah.
I was wondering if you could speak a little bit towards some of your networking experiences or tips that you had.
Yeah.
Kind of, when you were going out in the job market when you're younger, even right now, speaking to undergrads.
Yeah, sure. That's a great one. The question was networking and how do you do that as an undergrad? I can literally picture, and I get the chills thinking about it. I had my super senior year. I was at a house on Radcliffe out here, and friend of a friend and my father put me in touch with a guy named Tal Smith. Tal Smith was, and I'll get to your point. It's just like the image is really vivid. So I was on my little deck and I stared at my phone and I was like, how am I going to call this guy? Tal Smith, so the Houston Astros, he was the president of the Houston Astros. For a little while they had a little hill in the outfield. It was called Tal's Hill. And Tal was a legend. And in baseball. So, by the way, the reason I ended up with an economics degree is because I looked, and most of the people whose jobs I aspired to had economics degrees. People that hadn't played Division I baseball in college or in the minor leagues in high school had economics degrees, or there were sports journalism backgrounds, and I was trying to figure out how to work in baseball. Tal Smith was president of the Astros. Most of his career was in the 70s and the 80s, this was in 1990, this would have been 2001 probably when I called him. And so the question is, how do you network? And I think one of the things you will be blown away by, and I will try to do right by anybody in this room, because Tal Smith, just because somebody called him, he invited me up to upstate New York. That afternoon, I drove up there. It was 4.5 hours, but I basically got there by the game time, and I sat and I watched a baseball game with him. He put me in touch with a bunch of people within the Astros organization. None of those jobs actually, to me, they didn't pan out. I ended up doing something else. But it gave me the confidence that if all you did was you picked up the phone and you asked, somebody was going to help you. Now, I got lucky, and I cold emailed probably 100 people. I want to tell you, I think I had 4 or 5 warm responses within the baseball industry. Tal was a phone call. There was a couple of others, but anybody ever asked me that question, the reason is because of Tal Smith. That guy had no reason to spend an hour on the phone with me and to invite me up to a baseball game and spend several hours, but he did it anyways. And I think what you'll find is throughout your career, people will do that for you, whether it's a Providence College network or people that you grew up with or anybody. And I think that's the other benefit of taking a job and finding that experience while you're in school. Another equally awesome experience with sort of a equally vivid opportunity for me is I worked for the Brockton Rocks, which is a minor league, independent minor league baseball team outside of Massachusetts. Similarly, I just kind of got it on a whim. The people that I worked with that summer, they fed me in hot dogs, and I don't remember what else. I had to wear the Kangaroos outfit a couple times. It wasn't glamorous. I had a t-shirt slingshot, but every single one of those people would go out of their way to help me, throughout my early 20s and mid 20s. And so I've tried really hard, and that's a lot of honestly why I'm here today, is to make sort of the same offer back. And so for me personally, my network is largely sports, although it's grown a lot. It's been able to connect into other fields, and I think you won't know that you can do that until you try. So, you pick up the phone, you send somebody an email, and I think especially if you can kind of seek out what you do and what you're interested in and how that adds value, people will respond, and it's pretty cool. It's one of the neatest things about, going out into the real world and kind of making it happen. Anything else? There's no Red Sox questions, no sports specific questions. Okay.
Did you always want to go into baseball, or were you looking out there?
So that's a good question too. Did I always want to go into baseball? I mean, this is going to sound embarrassing, but it's true. I didn't think that I could add value in other ways. I would play, there was a baseball game called Stratomatic. It's pretty embarrassing. It was a dice game. My dad played it. I used to play it with my cousin. And you would roll the dice and you'd see what happened. It taught me pretty much everything I know about math. And then I had to figure out how to keep score. And I wasn't the most organized person, but I definitely had my baseball stats figured out. And I started to just make inferences about it. I started to go just do my own little research projects. And I got comfortable with the idea that I actually was learning something it was novel, like maybe somebody else didn't know this. And kind of in the way that I got comfortable with putting myself out there was through something that I developed real, my roommate was working on chemistry, like something that actually matters in the world. I was working on baseball, but the truth was they both allowed you to learn, and that was my own way to learn. So the answer is I was passionate about baseball, so much so that I was willing to be self-taught, but once I got into that, and I worked at a golf course for a couple years too, which was a pretty incredible experience, and I figured out similar ways to try to, basically put my little analytical brain to work and try to figure out, hey, how can we sell more range balls? How can we sell more lessons? And the head pro is a really nice guy, still there. This guy named Joe DeBach, and he just kept giving me more stuff to do. And it wasn't like it was directed, but I just got more comfortable and confident with the idea. Baseball was the thing that gave me the confidence, but pretty quickly I learned that it was extensible to other fields. But it really was baseball, and I don't know the answer to that other than I think my dad just took me to a lot of games when I was a kid, and I thought it was cool. Tony Gwynn was a Padre, and that was like my guy. So actually that was, being able to get out and feel like you're a part of that was a lot of the draw, but it really taught me that you could add skills beyond that. And the timing was good too for baseball, because there was this book that Michael Lewis wrote about baseball that I think kind of brought that analytical field into the forefront, and it gave it credibility. So from that standpoint, maybe I'm lucky. I'm lucky for a lot of reasons, but one of the things was what I happened to be really interested in as a student in my dorm room and getting some feedback from my professors ended up becoming something that people took seriously as sort of an academic discipline. I don't know that that's going to happen. That was a 1 in 100 shot, but it helped me gain a lot of confidence that it would work in other places too. Yeah.
So I think you created your own luck. I don't think you put yourself out there.
Yeah.
And I have a son and I'm trying to encourage
Yeah.
the same thing too. And so making contact with potential employers, places you'd like to work in.
Yeah.
How important is it, if you could talk about having knowledge about that institution or that firm before you actually
Yeah.
send the email or make the
Yeah, that's a really good one. And I'll give you the example. So the question is, how knowledgeable do you need to be before you go, have an interview or put yourself out there? So at ViaSat right now, and previously when I was at StubHub, I think that's the number, that separates, especially, everybody goes and uses a job site like Indeed or, I don't know what the other ones are. And you upload LinkedIn, obviously you upload your resume and you hope that somebody finds you. I think that can happen. There's a lot of, we have some pretty incredible person that we hired at ViaSat that was just total happenstance, found the right listing. But in my experience, doing the homework ahead of time and being pretty comfortable, I don't know if you guys, and this is something that I didn't do when I was in school, but I've learned it as I got kind of into the world, is you can go read a lot of information about public companies. You can go read, their entire transcripts from their conference calls every quarter. CEOs talk at length about strategy, what are the challenges in their business areas. This is all public information. It's all free. You can go look on YouTube. You can watch people talk, and you would be blown away. I'm in it now, and I'm in an industry which is changing pretty rapidly. We're looking to hire new people. There's a lot of information that's accessible, and not everybody will take the time for a fresh out of school interview, or for somebody that's been out in the industry for 10 or 15 years. You would not, I would tell you that if you do the homework ahead of time, if you sort of seek out employers that, they'll tell you what they're looking for. They'll tell you what the key strategic problems are in their industry, and they're going to ask you somebody's going to ask you that question in an interview. And if I wouldn't be surprised if you went and read their, you go read the transcript from earnings call, read a financial filing, and somebody's going to be really impressed that you did. You also might know better than they do the answer, and that's okay too. But there's a lot of freely available information. If I'm going to go have a meeting with somebody I haven't met before, the first thing I do is try to go find them on YouTube, try to go read anything that they've written or said. And the same thing I think you'll find is true for a job interview. You can do a lot of the same stuff, and I think, I don't know if that's like garden variety advice, but I think it works pretty well. Okay. Oh, yeah.
It seems that it's like the companies that you've been working for are very like new and growing industries.
Yeah.
What's been the hardest challenge to expand?
Yeah. Well, essentially, I think growth, and I'll give you the satellite industry as an example. Growth solves a lot of problems for working for a company. Now, there's a lot of chaos that can come with growth, but the opportunities that you get when a company is growing, and you're right, that is basically that's the thread that goes through my experience at StubHub and ViaSat. I'll give you the example. Baseball is not growing. The satellite industry as a whole has not grown. So you've got, I would say that I think, especially if you're looking to develop skills and your career and advance, you're going to do better to get into an environment, even if it's in flux and it's changing and it's a little bit chaotic. Chaos creates opportunity for people that are going into a new field. So I'm biased towards that. It can be a little bit unsettling. I think, it's not necessarily for everybody, but growth creates more opportunity than an industry that's sort of stagnating. And so in the satellite industry, ViaSat has been, we've had a lot of people that worked at the company for a long time. We've also attracted a lot of people from other satellite operators and people within the value chain there, because our company has grown a lot and other have not. So I think it's a really good question. So I would say sort of seek that out. If you're interested in areas that are not growing quite as much, I think you're still going to find within those companies there's going to be ebbs and flows in terms of the departments. I think kind of talked about that for the internet. Changes everything. So even in financial industries, they may be changing really rapidly, but there's pockets of growth as well. So I think growth is the key for me. Yes.
Going back to the question about networking, is
Yeah.
one of the questions I get the most when we're doing career and advising, if you will. And it's an excellent question that Ryan asked you. Similar to your experience of just picking up the phone and lucking out and getting an opportunity to meet that person. One thing that you folks can do, particularly as you begin looking for either an internship or a job, is you can call.
I was going to say, you should call me. I'm happy to do that. Yeah.
But you can either, it could be somebody, a CEO or a CFO that you just know about in a particular company, or it could be a connection through your family or your friends. but offer to do an interview.
Yeah.
In other words, say, as part of my class project or whatever it is I'm going to be doing at Providence College, I'd like to be able to come and ask you a few questions about your career. People love to talk about their careers. And so, and they're very giving back, and you've got a good example of that here today. But it's not out of the ordinary to think about actually picking up the phone, cold call or email, and saying, I'm so interested in XYZ, your industry. Of course, you have to do the homework first about the firm, but then, you're not asking for anything other than an interview. So it's a way to get in the door, and usually those same people will then give you more connections.
And
just as Chris said.
That's such, and I would aim high. So CEO, and you can do this for Providence or, if you have other connections elsewhere. Everybody is, it's a question. It's humbling. So that I get the chills from thinking about the Tal Smith thing, because I was just like, what is this guy doing? Like, what? And he did it anyways. And I feel basically indebted forever to him. And had Tal passed away, actually, so in the world, by the way, the other thing is the world is crazy small. Everybody knows everybody. Tal Smith's son, Randy, was the general manager for the Padres in the 90s, and he was a scouting director while I was there. So I ended up sitting next to Randy at a dinner, telling him the same story about his dad, and it was a really cool experience. But aim high. There's a lot of Providence College alums that have gone on to do really cool things in a lot of different industries. I'm always really humbled. I've had a couple, when I lived out in San Francisco, actually, the reason that I'm here today, I met a guy who works in the development office for PC, and it was based in San Francisco. And I was pretty early in my career, and there's a friend of mine, guy, I won't say his name, just because he's funny like that, but a guy that we went out to a dinner together, and he's a PC grad, and we met, we were like 25-year-old kids and just moved out to the city, and really giving community, and I would aim high. Yeah, don't think, I can't email a CFO or a CEO. Yeah, you can. And now that they're going to love to take you to lunch. And it's a really good way to do it, to not say, I want a job, but say, hey, what do you do? Like, what can I do? Yeah. Yep. I thought I saw somebody. Yeah, okay, sure.
First of all, on behalf of everybody, we'd like to thank you for coming and sharing your story. Because that's tons of, it's like reading 4 books.
Yeah.
Right? So, from what I hear, I sense that your passion wasn't just truly baseball, it's about learning and experiment.
Yeah.
You opened doors for yourself because you never closed any of them. So how important is for them to hear is that to be somewhat flexible, yet know your direction.
Yeah.
Right? So when you go and get an opportunity, you don't think it's something under your qualification. Right?
Yeah, I think intellectual, so people ask me that, so I'm in a job now where we spend a lot of time trying to figure out, again, you're hiring into jobs that maybe didn't exist before. Intellectual curiosity is the name of the game, and somebody that's not going to stop, hey, this, here's the job description, do this, or here's the project description, you're just going to keep going. And I think that's, if you can find anything that keeps you interested and engaged, it doesn't really matter what it is. And I think that's also true in people, family members, friends who will ask, how do I get into this spot? Generally, you do end up, and especially when you're young, I think when the time to take a risk in your career and to take a couple of risks in your career, my personal experience with StubHub was I was young and could afford for the thing not to work out. I remember I called my dad, and I had a couple of other good opportunities working for the NBA, working in Major League Baseball, based on those experiences that I had when I was young, right out of school. I ended up doing StubHub. My dad said, well, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? It's not going to work out, right? And he was right. I was 25, and I didn't have a lot of responsibility, luckily. It was just sort of coming into the part where I could handle paying my rent. But it was a great time to take a chance on something that could grow. And again, that's a similar job. The job description wasn't defined. The opportunity grew as the company grew, and then my interests grew. And if you can find something that really keeps you motivated and interested, and I think it could be anything. It doesn't have to be. You're right. And I learned that too. That's what I was able to pick up out of that. So.
You just have to excel.
Yeah. So it was really fun. It was really fun to be here. Thank you for saying that. Hopefully it was interesting. I don't know if anybody, feel free to, I can leave my email and information with you guys afterwards. And I think I can stick around too if anybody has any other questions. I guess I appreciate it. It was really fun. Thanks.
Thank you for joining us, and thanks to Chris Dankberg for sharing his insights with the Providence College community. This podcast is available at all the usual places and on the college's YouTube channel. Feedback is welcome at podcast@providence.edu. For our producer, Chris Judge, I'm Joe Carr. Until next time.